if you look at the immigration laws in the 1920s, they were aimed not only at blacks or browns, they were aimed at Southern European
Italians,
whites, including Italians, basically people of Mediterranean descent. Right. So that's true. But look, I mean, it would be one thing if we were living in the immediate aftermath of all that, right? But slavery ends in 1865. Now you have segregation. But segregation is basically on its way out starting in 1954, the Brown decision. That's 75 years ago. Certainly, I think most of the vestiges of this entrenched white discrimination in favor of whites, racism of the old stripe, is either gone or on its way out by the end of the 60s. So what that means, though, is that you've got people, let's just say someone's born in 1970, right? They are 55 years old and they have not lived through any of this. In fact, they come of age, 20 years later, and all of this is kind of in the rearview mirror. And yet, they are treated as if they are somehow a continuation of people they never met, institutions they had nothing to do with. And in fact, by the time they are in college, the laws, the policies are the opposite. So when they applied to college, they were at a racial disadvantage.
Denied,
right? If they've had to tiptoe their whole life on eggshells around blacks. They've had to sort of like revere every black person in sight.
Yeah, but you do understand that this whole notion of division, and I know this very well because I saw it in Venezuela, the whole notion of division is so that you can attack the very institutions of freedom and everything that makes a country great. You can't have people liking each other and socialism at the same time. You have to have an attack on people, whether it's ethnicity, socioeconomic. You cannot have, people can't get along because the left can't work that way. They can't come into power that way. The only way, and this is what Karl Marx did, right?
Yeah, Marx divided.
So don't you think that the left keeps perpetuating this in order to cause division?
Yes, I do think that the old Marxist division was based upon economics, right? It was essentially the rich against the poor. Marx had different names for it, the proletariat, the bourgeoisie, but that's what he meant. Now, the left today has made that more complex because it's rich against poor, but it's black against white, it's straight against gay, it's men against women. So this
identity
this
politics.
Is a multi-vectored form of division. That is true. But here's the question, and that is, we would be better. But conservatives, we've been trying to do this in a sense for 30 years, but I would have to say that we've somewhat failed. And by that I mean, we've been trying to promote a non-racial universalism, right? We've been saying to people, look, your race is not only is it not the most important thing about you, it's close to the least important thing about you. Or it should be. Why? Because being of a certain race shouldn't give you any advantage or disadvantage at all. So what we've been trying to do is to encourage minority groups to diminish their sense of racial tribalism. Why? Because how can you live in a universalist society with, let's say, a colorblind approach if all these groups, which, by the way, may have at one time been small minorities, but now are large minorities, and there are many parts of the United States where whites too are a minority. So the old idea of whites are the majority, and then
Not
somehow
in Texas, that's certainly the case.
In Texas, Hispanics have overtaken whites. But I mean, if you just add up the minority groups, even 30 years ago, because remember, the minority groups include women. Women are half the population right there.
That's right.
So the minority groups always outnumbered the so-called majority, as long as you're counting women in that group. But today, look, blacks are what? 13 or 14%, Hispanics are 17 or 18%. Then you have Asian Americans. Then you have all the gays and the trans people. Then you have women. You're talking about 70% of the population pretending to be a minority, which is nonsense, right? And second of all, those people, these minority groups now, are very vested in their own identity, admittedly encouraged by the left.
Exactly.
Yeah, the left stokes it,
That's
they
what I mean.
cultivate it. But what I mean is, so here's the problem.
Why do we make it an issue? Like this is like my least favorite topic.
No, I know, but,
you know
but here's what I'm saying. And let's look at the kind of the Shiloh Hendricks incident, which involved this confrontation, of course, at the playground. But I'm only using the incident to illuminate a bigger thing. And that's this. That I think the reason so many people responded to Shiloh Hendricks and gave her money is not because they thought she acted properly in the situation, but they were like, listen, every other group gets to italicize their identity and be for it. And whites are the only group that can't do that. But not only that, that somehow the N-word is considered such a great evil that you can have a black guy murder 10 white guys in cold blood, or in the case of Carmelo Anthony, go stab a white guy to death, and it's perfectly okay for him to raise money. You know, this Carmelo Anthony was raising money on Give, Send, Go. No problem. Give, Send, Go says we're a neutral platform. You can raise money for your cause, and the money was supposedly for his legal defense. The moment that Shiloh Hendricks went on Give, Send, Go to raise money, Give, Send, Go had to issue a statement, and they were like, you know, we are against hate. So interestingly, for them,
they're against hate for one group and not the other group.
Not only that, but the two things weren't comparable. In Shiloh Hendricks' case, she didn't harm anybody.
Right.
She just yelled out a bad word. She was upset. In fact, the guy was rifling through her bag, and then she storms off. So the level of harm that she inflicted is minor, infinitesimal, compared to what Carmelo Anthony did. So,
but the pressure that Give, Send, Go gets from the left is way more pressure than what we do.
No,
I mean,
but see,
by far, which is why it happened.
In the Soviet Union, totalitarianism came with gulags, secret police, and brute force. But in the West, it looks different. It's soft, it's subtle, it comes cloaked in compassion and compliance. Live Not by Lies by Angel Studios is a new docuseries that exposes how this soft totalitarianism is already taking root in America and beyond. Based on Rod Dreher's best-selling book, the series shares the testimonies of men and women who lived through communist regimes and now see disturbing parallels in today's world. They warn of the dangers of conformity, the erosion of religious freedom, and the rise of ideological control in schools and businesses. But this isn't just a warning, it's a call to action, a reminder that truth is worth standing for. If you care about faith, family, and freedom, Live Not by Lies is required viewing and only available on Angel Guild. Join today by visiting angel.com/Dinesh and stream Live Not by Lies along with hundreds of other films and shows. That's angel.com/Dinesh.